So last night, some of us got together and we thought, hey, you know what, let's not go for the fake news panel at all, because then it'll be obvious that the announcement of a fake news panel was fake news. So, kind of meta commentary, but here we are. One of the books which influenced me as a journalist, and would, most of you would have read it, is a book which was released 100 years ago by Walter Lippmann called Public Opinion. And the first chapter of that book, Public Opinion, is called The World Outside and the Pictures in Our Heads. And Lippmann's essential premise, which is, kind of almost obvious enough by now, is that all of us look at the world by constructing narratives in our heads which may or may not conform with the world as it actually is. And this is really a process exacerbated today by technology and so on. So my question for all the panelists, therefore, is that, we often think of fake news as in here are some bad actors, maybe it's somebody's IT cell or whoever, and they're spreading fake news and all of that. But isn't the crux of the problem that there is actually an organic demand for such fake news?
I don't think there's an organic demand for misinformation. It is just that if you look at the misinformation that usually circulates, it is very provocative. And, people getting killed. There are multiple videos that we have debunked, somebody getting murdered in Brazil, somebody getting murdered in Mexico, and it is being claimed that, Hindu is killing Muslim or Muslim is killing Hindu. All the narratives are very, very provocative. And that is what makes people share it more. It is not that they want it. It is those who are putting out misinformation, they very well understand how the social dynamics of the country. And it is not that misinformation is the same in every country. Misinformation, the nature of misinformation changes from one country to another. For example, if you go to let's say, Thailand, etc., there's much more medical misinformation there than political misinformation. So it depends on, from country to country, their political situation, because right now what we are battling, mainly two kinds in India, is political misinformation, medical misinformation. Medical misinformation is much more difficult to tackle, so let's not even go there. But political misinformation is very, very closely connected with what's happening in the country, the political story of the country, and there's an organized industry which is putting it out, knowing exactly well what impact it will have.
So, there's a well-known MIT study that was released last year which said that fake news is 70% more likely to be retweeted based on a exhaustive study that they did over time. And they also said that true stories are likely to take 6 times longer to reach a certain set of people. And I think they had a sample of 1,500 people for that part. So, fake news is just fun. It's more nice to consume. If you were to break that up a little further, so one is the political hate and all of that, and you send it because you want other people to resonate with you for whatever reason. But there's a lot of feel-good stuff, right? So you'll have let's say there's a photograph of Nirmala Sitharaman standing with a young Air Force cadet or Air Force pilot girl. Here is mother and daughter, and, Nirmala Sitharaman's daughter, and how it's a great thing that you have a Minister of Defense and her daughter is also. So it's just feel good, right? So no one wants to or will clarify that this could be fake or false, but just forwards it blindly. We have a lunar mission going on right now. Just last week there were images which were released saying that, here are 5 images, beautiful images of the Earth taken by Chandrayaan. Now obviously you want to believe it and it fits with the narrative, and then you forward it. Fake. There are many more examples in the medical space, and which is where it gets far more tricky and dangerous. For instance, put coconut oil and you won't get dengue. Eat papaya leaf, and, again, you won't get dengue. So, now, in some of these cases, there is a very, very small element of truth in it, because there may be some nutritional contribution of papaya leaf to fighting dengue, but it surely cannot prevent, and for that you need to go to a proper doctor and take normal medicines. So, and there are other examples like that. So, it could be something that's feel good, and therefore you want to share it with your friends and family, which is what you usually do on WhatsApp. It could be because of a concerted, architected, designed push, which is what Pratik also talked about. And it could be in other cases where you really fear for something. You fear that a bank is going to get raided. As in there's going to be a run on the bank, and you're going to tell, I'm going to tell Amit and Santosh that, pull your money out of Punjab National Bank because Nirav Modi has run away with $1 billion. I mean, this is stuff that happened year before last. So, and it's fear, concern. So I think it's about 4 or 5 emotions which drive it, but the net impact is obviously quite dangerous.
So Manisha, I mean, For the media then, is there, I mean, given the fact that your incentives are also tailored around having your stories read, doing stories that people are interested in, if fake news does seem to attract more clicks and more attention, does it then push you towards privileging the sensational over the everyday?
No, actually, I have a slightly different take to this. And building from what Govind said about the fun element of it, I always wonder when I go back home, why is it that my family or my parents or my relatives are more excited about like a fake news WhatsApp thing than my piece or some other journalistic piece that I'll say, why don't you read this? And pad lenge, but they're more excited about this, WhatsApp image or a message. And I think that over time, there's something to think about for all news professionals. Over a period of time, a lot of journalism today is just unreadable. We don't write for our readers anymore. We write for our peers. We write for the ministry that we cover. We want to look intelligent among our sort of peer group or the people the beats that we go to, the bureaucrat or the politician. And we're just simply not talking to our readers when it comes to just clarifying an issue or simplicity of language, not using jargons, or really addressing a reader's concern. I think the one thing to learn from fake news, if you can say, is just this: here's a product that completely caters to you, talks to you in your language, in very simple ways. It's horrible and it's evil. But maybe journalists also need to start simplifying what they do, demystifying their work, and also simplify the stuff that they write for, and really cater to their audience.
Dr. Sarin, I'll turn to you here, and it's kind of apt that we have a psychiatrist on the panel. Why do people, even if they don't want to believe fake news, let's say, even if there isn't organic demand for it, they are still more susceptible to it than they otherwise, why is that? What drives us towards?
So I think maybe we perhaps need to, just step back a little bit here and look at it in a slightly different perspective. Very often we tend to think of this as a modern phenomena, as something that is happening now. And the fact of the matter is that isn't particularly true. Misinformation, what we call fake news, is something that has always been around. What has changed is the fluency or facility with which technology, helps spread it. But in essence, this is something that has always been there. And fake news is something that, it's a classic example of where the extremes sort of tend to define the rest of it. So the periphery, in a sense, defines the center. Everything that is misinformation or that gets tweeted, retweeted, falana, dhimkana, is, as pointed out, not necessarily malintent. The third problem is that news is partly reporting and partly opinion. And the question as to which part of the opinion comes in, and whether I like that opinion, whether it is in keeping with my opinion or not, will then determine as to whether, the same thing about the construction of narrative. It's like our pharmacology textbooks, right in, 40 years ago, used to say, how do you define an alcoholic? And the answer is very simple. An alcoholic is anybody who drinks whom you don't like. So any news that I am not
is fake news.
Is fake news. So Donald Trump will see some bits as fake news. I will see some bits as fake news. You will see some bits as fake news. But what is happening again is that the periphery is then defining the margin. So essentially, what we have to do is to figure out the construction of this narrative. Sensationalism will sell. Sensationalism will get. That's why it is. That's why it's sensationalistic. That's what sensation is all about. People will seek sensation, and that's not going to change in a big hurry. So perhaps these are things that we need to figure out to begin with.
Santosh, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, all of us got our news from a from a few monolithic sources. You had the Times of India coming every day to your house or whatever, and there was a broad consensus on what the truth is. And that's changed now. We get all our information and our knowledge from this entirely dispersed sources. And you wrote a great column touching on these sort of this phenomenon, where you've spoken about how over the centuries we have, quote, successfully built institutions that help manufacture collective trust, stop quote. And you've spoken about how what you see happening today is a breakdown of those institutions and that collective trust. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. No, so essentially, the very idea of something being labeled the news, it used to be the news brought to you by so-and-so, which is actually a hell of a conceit, if you think about it. The idea of your being able to sum up the world in these very definitive kind of this idea of the news as this single monolithic construction. But I think it was an important part, I think, of several institutions that built trust for themselves by creating an elaborate, cultural system. So the news system, for instance, if you look at the newspaper, it uses devices like symmetry. It uses the idea of the editor. If you look at how it is laid out, there is the headline and all of these are creating sense. If you look at the names, they are the Herald and the Times of India, which is a hell of a thing to be able to say, right? Which is you represent India and the Times of India, right? And you look at most newspapers, or they will carry these kind of, they have names of that kind, and they construct this almost self-validating kind of an authority. Television news, you look at the signature that comes before a news. And then the person in earlier days, of course, when they gave the news still, sits formally, dressed formally, and news is a visitation from the ether virtually, It kind of materializes and they kind of become the medium for the news. So these are constructed ideas. What has happened over time is that as we have started dismantling the apparent naturalness of these constructions and saying, but actually, who is bringing me the news? And so, for instance, even I think a report that was, that I think yesterday was I think I read about the idea of saying the gender composition of editorial team or the caste composition. These are all ways in which we are legitimately asking questions of saying news is not just a sort of a natural manifestation. It has been constructed. The moment the consequence of something like that is that we start, therefore, being able to dismantle the authority of news. And once you start dismantling the authority of any institution, judiciary, where does the judge come from, what caste is the judge, etc., the sort of the illusion that we had created of authority and order starts coming apart. Once it comes apart, how do you put it back together? And I think that's what we are finding when it comes to fake news today, is that you are willing to believe, any narrative that suits you, right? Because what matters is who brings you the news. If NDTV has said it, then I can dismiss it if I am I have a certain point of view. I don't need to focus on the news, but on who brings it to me. And eventually, if you ask really the fundamental question is, why do we need the truth? I mean, what is so important? We construct our own self-images on lies, on a bundle of lies that we tell about ourselves. What is so profoundly important about the truth? What is so profoundly important? If I can believe that Nirmala Sitaraman that was our daughter and that made me feel good, it doesn't affect me in any dramatic way. If I can believe in a narrative that supports, my political position, why? I mean, the cost of believing that is low and the benefit it gives me is high. So again, there is a natural incentive, I think, for fake news has fertile ground in that sense.
I think that truth may be a lofty word, and a journalist's job is to achieve a certain clarity. And I think there's immense value in that. I don't think it's like, why do we need clarity? So, and what misinformation and fake news does is just muddy the waters, right? So I wouldn't agree that, I do think it's terribly dangerous too. So maybe truth is just, we all journalists like to tell ourselves that, we are, speaking truth to power and we're in pursuit of truth and all, but maybe at the heart of it, it's really clarity, right? An issue and a certain clarity towards your reader and towards your audience.
Well, I mean, I think we shouldn't, however, make the mistake of conflating fake news and mainstream media. I mean, mainstream media in itself is not a real source of fake news. I mean, yeah, maybe a few bad actors. No, it is. But I think in percentage terms, I mean, if you look at your, just to be fair, I mean, if you look at your daily WhatsApp inbox, I mean, 95% of it will come from sources that you have no clue. Including stuff which is manufactured and distributed, and as Santosh nicely said, it just makes you feel good. You know, when you point out, to his point, say, but Nirmala says that is not mother and daughter. They say, no, but it looks nice. So it just feels good. So, and therefore, does the truth really matter?
And I think there's also a distinction to be made here between truth and facts. Truth is a lofty term, but what a journalist can do is, while they may or may not have access to the truth, they can report the facts as accurately as they can. I'll turn to Pratik here. One inflection point which you pointed out in one of your interviews was 2016, when one Jio comes in and makes data and bandwidth easily available, cheap Chinese smartphones, search through the Indian market, and you pointed that out as an inflection point. I'd like you to talk a little bit about your journey with AltNews. What was the impetus behind it? Why did you feel this was necessary? And how did you see this whole ecosystem evolve rapidly? Because 2016 is like yesterday. So much has happened in so short a span of time, especially for someone as old as me. So tell me a little bit about your...
I think Boom and AltNews started pretty much at the same time. Boom started right after demonetization, November 2016, while we started in February 2017. I think the reasons are pretty much similar. That I believe that I spend a lot of time on social media, and that has been the case since 2013, 2012, and we seriously saw a lot of these videos and images coming, and with false narratives, and we saw a bunch of websites like Postcard News, etc. Now they have gone down because the guy got arrested, and now every website wala is a little scared, because but as far as WhatsApp etc. is concerned, it was just increasing. And so why we started at that point of time, because and it was from a position of fear actually, because at that point of time we used to see these videos, very violent videos, and frankly at that point of time I did not have much of an understanding as far as what impact it can have. There was always this fear that, look, this video is going to lead to a riot. Eventually what happened was these child kidnapping rumors, which became much more lethal. But when we started, it was basically from the fear that, because as software engineer, the core team that started AltNews, none of us were journalists. So, as people from the tech industry, we could find out with very simple digital tools what is the fact corresponding to a video and image. And we thought it's necessary to put it out, because at that point of time, we thought that if we don't do this, this is going to lead to another riot. So that is how we started.
And was it sort of frustrating for you that falsehood can spread so fast and like wildfire, but the truth is really hard to get out there?
No, that is not the frustration. The frustration is with multiple tech companies. Okay. This is a product of frustration. That is, I have gone to several forums and said, there's a tech out there, you can detect copyright violations, right? That is, you have a video and you put another video, you can detect copyright violation. Similarly, if there's something which is a video which is circulating, now the story of the video remains the same, right? Whether it's whatever context it circulates in, the story of the video remains the same. So essentially what we need is a system which ties a story to a video. And whenever anybody comes up with an image or comes across an image or video on social media, find a way to tell the story behind it. That is what we are trying to do, and automate it. So this expansion of misinformation wouldn't have happened if tech companies would have stepped in and taken these measures long ago. There's a lot of automation that can be done at various levels. Not everything can be automated. Finally, you need a human mind to figure out these are the facts of an image or video. But a lot can be done, which I think will be very effective as solutions in terms of curbing misinformation. But unfortunately, nothing has been done till now.
So, if I may, you might want to sort of break down. You might want to break down that last, question a little bit. The fact that some news will spread faster, we understand, and not necessarily just the dangerous bit. In a sense, the affect-laden news will actually spread faster, both positively and negatively affect laden. Okay, and this is, like I said, has always been true. What technology has done is to ease the fluency of that. So the two parts of this are, one, the sort of the beguiling road that Santosh has taken us down. Ki kya farak padta? What is truth in any case? And the other, which is what technology is doing to both this and human responsiveness. Is it affecting reaction times? Is it reaction patterns? Is it because of the anonymity? Is it affecting the tone, texture, tenor of my responsivity, which because of that technology is morphing into different ways, is perhaps something that I think we need to be able to figure out better.
I think Santosh's rhetorical question was a lament and not a statement of his position. Govind, you wanted to say something?
No, I think, this is a big debate, right? What role do technology companies play? What can they do more proactively? I mean, you can take two positions. One is that they have no clue what they're doing and this is a wild animal on the loose. The other is that they created something which perhaps the power of which they've not fully been able to understand themselves. And the question I would further pose is, are they responding as effectively or efficiently as they should, given new developments that are happening? And to me, actually, the answer is more yes than no. And I'll give you an example. We had a attack in a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, right? And this was amazing because the attacker was wearing a helmet cam and was streaming the whole episode live on his Facebook account, and as he was shooting down people. We were getting, on our helpline forward saying that this cannot be true, but can you please check? Usually people say this, this is fake, so please check. So people are obviously somewhere realizing that this looks so true and yet hoping that it's not true. So at that time, there was one video being uploaded every second on some platform, YouTube, Facebook, and so on. So none of them were obviously prepared for it. And that video went viral and it was seen and it continues to be seen, despite what the tech companies say, and to some extent I agree, making a huge amount of effort to pull it down. What has happened subsequently, and this I know a little bit more from the Google YouTube side, is that today when there's an event that happens, they actually set up something called an incident commander. Right? So no longer is a technology platform in that sense playing completely mute spectator. So when the Notre Dame fire happened, as I understand, YouTube had an incident commander and they were actually scanning authoritative news sources in 4 or 5 continents to ensure that only the right news sources were being surfaced. So this is, to me, is a response. And I think this is what we should be actively looking out for and watching. I mean, are the technology companies responding to what is happening and what is changing, and are they responding fast enough? And at all points of time, it's important to keep up the pressure.
And Manisha, to come back to the media's role in this, do you guys set up systems and processes in place which play a proactive role in combating fake news, not just in your own kind of reporting and journalism, but in what you see? And also, does fake news become an issue for you only when a piece of fake news really breaks and causes lynchings or whatever, and then obviously you have to do a story on it? Or do you also think about ways to combat it before those things happen?
So I'll just come to your question, but I just wanted to add to one point about the truth. The falsehood spreading faster than truth. And I think that's true. That may be true for stories. But the issue of trust, there have been studies, I think again it was an MIT study that said that both Republican and Democrats believe that hyper-partisan websites like Breitbart were not to be trusted. In India, we had a study where I think it was Reuters or BBC that said that even a BJP supporter trusted ndtv.com more than Op India. This was, okay. I hope this, I just didn't peddle fake news on this, but I'll check it. But no, I remember reading this really well, that even BJP supporters trusted ndtv.com. And
sounds very dubious to me.
So I'm saying, I think that news professionals are getting a nice kick in their ass where they're being told that, okay, you're not, you have not been transparent with your methods, you have not really catered to our news needs. So you're not going to be the king, like Santosh said, you're not the guys who are going to tell us what the truth is and we can go elsewhere. But I think that much depends now on how we react to this, because the implicit trust, I don't think people are still losing trust in mainstream media organizations. When it comes to Newslaundry, a lot of our work is actually critiquing the mainstream media. So for us, a lot of the times we are fact-checking fake news is stuff that we've seen on television channels. And like, I remember when the Balakot strikes happened, there was this big thing about this big terrorist being killed in the strikes, and everyone, all channels, literally every channel, put it out, and it turned out it just wasn't true. So a lot of our fact-checking, so like Pratik and Govind would do more of WhatsApp and stuff like that. A lot of our fact-checking is actually stuff that we see on mainstream news. So, yeah. So
after Pulwama boom, I mean, in that 1 week after Pulwama, we debunked something like 30 very viral posts on broad social media and mainstream media. 30, I mean, just after Pulwama. And that, of course, also brought to light how when there is, let's say, design at work, how things can, the distribution can accelerate so rapidly.
So let's kind of talk about solutions now. What are the different things that we in civil society or perhaps with the state do to solve this problem of fake news? At one level, if people are consuming it, it seems almost patronizing to call it a problem because, hey, they're consuming it willingly, but leaving that broader philosophical point aside because the truth does matter. What Pratik has tried with the AltNews app, obviously, is a technology solution on his own. And I'm sure the technology companies, Facebook, Google and all, are also trying to do various interventions on that. For example, now when you forward a message from WhatsApp, it says forwarded, there is red watermark, little things like that. To what extent do you think technology can solve this problem?
I think tech has a huge role. The simple thing, most of the misinformation comes on your phones. You're not going to open your laptop, transfer it, do a Google reverse image search. Nobody's going to do that. Why has it taken such a long time to just bring a Google reverse image search for mobile phones? I mean, it is not going to tell you the answer that this is true, this is false, but that is the first thing that should have been done. So there's a lot that tech can be done, and very, very simple tech. What we're using is something called perceptual hashing. This is a thing which has been there for a very long time. With deep learning, machine learning, the tech has gone so far. I mean, you put an image on, somebody puts your image on Facebook and they tell you, look, somebody has uploaded your picture, right? So tech has gone very, very far, and the sort of issue that we have, not everything can be solved, but there are large sections of it which can be curbed to a large extent using tech. It cannot be automated, but the portions which need to be automated have not been automated.
So I think tech is actually limited in its, it has a role, but I think it's limited because the people who create, and particularly those who create deliberately for some profit, do it with increasing ingenuity. And therefore it becomes that much more difficult for a machine of any sort to even catch it at a late filter, forget an early filter. Our position is that we have to educate people. We have to educate people there are two kinds, because most forwards on your WhatsApp come from your 60-year-old uncle or aunt sometimes, but mostly it's uncles. So therefore you have to educate at the top, which is far more difficult. But where you can focus on, and perhaps with some measurable impact, is children. And you have to educate children on not just about fake news and misinformation, but about using the internet itself. Right? So how do you use the internet? How do you not jump to Wikipedia to check something because it's not an original source? How do you use the internet in a way that it supplements some other form of core reading or researching as a kid? How do you use the internet so you don't jump to it for, let's say, because you've got a slight catch in your back or a pain in the head, because what it will tell you most likely is that you've got cancer or tumor, right? So, so therefore it's about media literacy, but it's also, as I think, as I look ahead, it's about media wisdom, and at a very early age. We run classes we've been mostly doing it in Bombay, but we're running classes which are like 3-hour training sessions pro bono in several schools in Bombay now, and we're finding very, very good response. This is, we've not scaled up, nor I don't know whether we will, but I think, and the other countries are doing it. Finland has done it very admirably at scale. So training, teaching, making people aware of the internet itself, leading to wisdom or media wisdom, I think is the way to go.
I have a small point to make. So, I just want to take the Wikipedia example. And yes, it's important to tell kids that Wikipedia should not be a first source of information. But what has made Wikipedia the first source of information? You type anything. what is the first search result? Wikipedia, right? So till the time there is, because that, if that is the first search result, in your head, you think that that is the most authoritative source. So unless you solve, yes, we can educate people, but again, I'm going back to this. This is not something that can be solved, everything needs to be done. This is a huge problem. Yes, we need to educate people, but let's say if Google keeps throwing you Wikipedia, if they can't figure out, how to rank based on, the information itself and Wikipedia's default sort of thing, then people will keep going back to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia, we have seen how many times it has been defaced. I mean, for example, that the time, when the Modi thing came on time and the... Hello? Yeah, so... Time magazine came up with the article before election, and immediately the author's thing was defaced. And people took screenshots and kept circulating it. There were multiple edits, and it took a long time for the Wikipedia editors to actually lock down Wikipedia, that particular page. But if you look for the author's name, the first thing is the Wikipedia page. So whatever information will be there, they'll think that, what was written is that he is a Congress rep or something like that. And that becomes authoritative. So that is where tech has to come into picture and figure out things.
That's a very interesting sort of hypothetical test case also, because people use Wikipedia so much because the utility is enormous, and normally they of course have their citations and all that. So it's a trustworthy source also for a reason, but I can see what you're saying, that if you could build into your search engine weightages something that also accounts for accuracy, then that would certainly help. We're kind of running out of time. We have 5 minutes to go before the Q&A. So I'd also then like to come at you, Santosh, with another of the solutions that is often proposed, which of course those who know me will know I oppose wholeheartedly, is government regulation. What are sort of your views on that? I mean, my sense always is that social problems can only largely be solved by society, that the state only makes things worse. What's your view?
No, I think it's a difficult question in this case, and I don't know about government regulation specifically, but the fact that a lot of the technology companies certainly have the kind of power that they themselves hadn't bargained for and do not fully understand. And if you think about it, you think about the whole idea of freedom of expression, however much it has been exalted, that in operation, actually, the freedom of expression was extremely limited. You had a very channelized sort of institutions that controlled information. So news media were all about institutional sort of control over information. And if you were to look at how democratic it was barely. You have 3 letters to the editor on a daily basis, right, in a newspaper. You have, what were the sources in which, the general kind of population could voice its opinions? Democracy, once in 5 years you vote. So, the idea of democracy, the idea of the fact that everyone has a voice was actually channelized in a very regulated and a restrained kind of a manner. Suddenly what has happened is this absolute opening out where everyone has a voice, and everyone not only has a voice, but as Alok said, it gets, immediately and widely redistributed globally. I don't think our social systems have been geared to handle this. So what we are talking about is technology evolving at a rate and creating an imbalance that is so far ahead of our social and administrative systems to cope with, that we are having this vast gulf. And now it is one thing to say that let it resolve itself and let sort of, therefore this particular sort of thing prevail. But in the absence of a social ability to adapt systems, what else do you do? But to at least have a certain other accelerated form of ordering, which tries to, at least to some extent, align the 2 rates of evolution. So that I willy-nilly see no option, but at least through the technology companies to say, you must take greater responsibility. Because it is something that you may not have bargained for, but this is now something you have created, and you must help at least mitigate the effects of this.
So Einstein once rather famously said that you can't use the same sort of thinking to solve the problem which you have created. Okay, so looking for technological solutions to technologically created problems is always going to be limited. You have to think beyond that. You have to figure out that what the technology has done is changed response patterns, social behaviors, and those can only be fixed by those larger understandings and conversations. In this, of course, technology will play a role, but is that going to be the fulcrum on which this rests? Perhaps not. Getting technology companies to take responsibility will be a function of civil society. In that sense, in answer to your question, my sense is that getting governments to take responsibility will also be on the push of civil society, because clearly it is civil society which has to push all the stakeholders into doing this. Now, the trouble is that even as I say this, I mean, it seems so far-fetched.
Mr. Amit Shah is listening to every word of yours. Give him more power.
It seems even more far-fetched. Absolutely. But the only way is conversation. So I actually completely agree with what Govind is saying. You know, that is the only way to talk to people. Responsibility, and hopefully that change will come about.
In fact, I noticed your eyebrows going up when Govind said something about 60-year-old WhatsApp uncles, but we'll cut to the audience for a Q&A now. Any questions?
And I must clarify, the Indie TV Op India bit is from Reuters study. I didn't make up something on a fake news panel.
Oh, she's been Googling.
Yeah, I've been frantically, but it's a Reuters study. We can agree on the sample size or the methodology, but it's a study.
I'm waiting for the AltNews piece on that Reuters piece. This doesn't end here. That gentleman in the middle.
Hi. My question is, so I hear that you say that you believe tech companies are actually doing quite some to curtail this fake news. However, from a pure user perspective, when I see Twitter, when I see Facebook, I see the likes of Madhupurnima Kishwar or Tarek Fatah still maintaining their verified status, although they peddle fake news like multiple times during a day. And there are very easy solutions that I can think of in my head, but I see like it's very counterintuitive that these tech platforms are not doing that. Like, why not take away someone's verified status? Or why not like mark a certain post as fake news the way WhatsApp marks posts?
There's this guy called Donald, what's his name, who'll go off Twitter first, if that were to be implemented.
Well, so I don't see, like from a purely user perspective, you guys are the experts, but from a purely user perspective, I don't see tech doing enough to curtail fake news and the way it spreads, especially from these nodes where the famous personalities where fake news spreads from. Why do you think tech is not doing enough? Is it government pressure? Is there other incentives for these big tech companies to not do enough on this because it provides them traffic? What
sure. Anyone would like to answer it?
I mean, I can take a quick stab at it. I think, as I've understood it, most tech companies are from California, and it's a very different libertarian capitalism approach to things, and freedom of speech, expression, and all of that. And I think it's those values which obviously don't work everywhere in the world. And I think what we are seeing is the tension as both sides or them versus many sides battle it out, right? So China can say that I'm going to shut that whole thing out completely and not allow anyone to enter. A democracy like India has to obviously, and has allowed them to enter, but now has to grapple with what happens when, there's, or America itself. Donald Trump has lied about 10,000 times till date. I think at the point that Washington Post did a first study, I think he was lying about 4 times a day. Then it went up after that. After they reported it, actually went up. So where do you start and where do you end? But I think it's a tension point, but we have to make sure that we keep the pressure up, as I said, on the technology platforms and ensure that they're responsive to what is changing, whether it's our way of thinking, our way of life, or when it comes to countries, our social and political structures.
Quick. So, for example, there was this sort of network of bots, etc., from Iran operating, putting out a lot of misinformation, targeting US. They took that down. But if we recognize the same thing in India, it's not going to go down. So there's also, they are not looking beyond, what is affecting US. They've not realized what is happening here, this child kidnapping rumors, etc. So there's also a bit of hypocrisy on their part that they are sort of the focus is very narrow.
The lady out there, can someone hand her a mic, please?
Hi, so this is something that all of you have touched on briefly, but I want to call it out largely as the elephant in the room, which is the politics that drives fake news in our country. And I want to just flesh this out a little bit, and you can correct me if what I'm saying is fake or partly fake or wholly fake. The people that power this massive engine that is putting fake news out in droves, if we tackle it through tech, we're not actually tackling the intent or their ability to then generate 50 million more such pieces of fake news when you take down 10 million or 5 million or two pieces, or the time it takes. So we're always going to try to play catch up. But what if we actually tackle this through political advocacy instead of just a tech solution, where I'm giving you a concrete example. The person who apparently put his money into running the first sort of interface between politics and social media in this country that we saw blow up, which was AAP, then was apparently disenchanted with the Aam Aadmi Party, put that same money into powering the present regime, the BJP's apparatus of pushing these factories or their allies, pushing out these factories of fake news. I hear that this person is apparently disenchanted. So if we pick up the people who are acting, putting their money, setting up these fake news rooms and pushing this out into the social media space and actually interacting with them, guilting them, making them say, look, you've got blood on your hands, can you sleep? If we actually tackle the politics behind this, will we have a better success rate? Because we tend to have amnesia about the connection between our own political choices, our politics, and fake news.
But yes. You have a question to add to that? Okay.
Just coming back to the technology part. I have worked with a global technology company, a giant, for 7 years. It is extremely unfair to say, without knowing the context, that they are hypocritical. They are not. If a company or multinational player is in 60 countries, it's not possible for them to alter their community guidelines to suit every single one of those countries.
That's not a question.
Yes. But you're shying away from the possibility, like she says, that all players have a responsibility. You can't just say that the technology companies are not doing enough, because it's not true. Look at Google's AI project with Guardian, but many, many other things you will know. So why can't it be a concerted effort between political activists, media, tech companies, government? It's very, very easy to sit here and say that, yes, they are not acting.
I think Govind made that point that they are doing a fair bit and they're working together with some people. I think the lady in orange would like to add a point.
Sorry, I wasn't actually suggesting that the responsibility pass back to each user and away from Facebook and Twitter at all. They are complicit as the villains of the piece, in my opinion. I am saying the government is equally complicit, and we need to call that out loudly and use political advocacy to take that down, and the actors that have powered this financially. I'm being very specific and very different from what she's saying. It's not an extension of what I'm saying. Just clarify.
Okay, let me this thing. I think, I was speaking at a consumer goods company had invited me to speak on this phenomenon of misinformation. And after that, this gentleman came up to me and said, I think I've really, this is a very interesting presentation and our talk, and I think there's a great business model in fake news. Oh, I said, that's great, because we've not figured out how to, fund this whole thing. He says, no, what I mean is by creating fake news. So I think that's really the problem. I mean, there is monetary incentive on the other side, and there isn't. And I don't think there's one political party, if at all, that's more complicit than the others. Everyone is in the game today, in varying degrees, shapes and sizes, maybe driven by their net worth, but everyone is in the game. And I think how they can be stopped or not stopped is a slightly different discussion, which is why when I look at the situation today, I would rather focus on the demand side than the supply side.
I agree, and also as far as the politics is concerned, like firstly, what Pratik does at AltNews is he busts news from pretty much all the parties and all the sides. That said, I would agree with you that by and large what is happening is driven by the ruling party. But the thing is, what political advocacy? We've tried that, we failed. They won overwhelmingly in 2019. So that political advocacy is over. We still try to do it in limited ways. But, you know, for the moment, we have kind of lost that game. And as for guilting people, come on, now you want to guilt these people? Sorry, very last question.
I have a question.
Very brief, very
quick question.
Yeah.
I'll get to it. So, it's
no statement, question mark has to be.
It's as simple as the fact that we have democratized the way we communicate, the way we get our messages out there, and we exercise our democratic power. That is fair, right? Now, equally, why shouldn't there be a way for us to get involved in, you know, auditing or getting involved in looking at what is fake and what is not? Each platform, instead of employing 10,000 people, which a lot of the likes of Facebook and Google are doing to check what is fake and what is not, they should just simply, what do you think of the thought that they should just simply give each individual some kind of way to rank it? Or
you want to crowdsource fact-checking, basically.
What do you think on those? What do you think? Would that work?
Facebook already does that effectively.
Facebook allows you to flag a post as false.
So flagging it is one thing, but actually, so, you know, upvoting it of sorts.
So I think the issue will be then, who are you and why do you have the, let's say, the relative merit to do it as opposed to someone else? I think it's a complex thing. I mean, I don't know if it's that
just the numbers. The higher it goes.
Yeah, so then you're saying that the accuracy of the thing doesn't matter. The number of people who vote to say that it's accurate matters. Yeah.
I don't think
Thank you, everyone. We absolutely have to go now. That is not fake news.